Welcome to another episode of the Jenna Banks Show, where you'll get tips, tools, and expert advice to help you live life to your fullest potential. Part of living life to your fullest potential is feeling great, feeling good in your body, feeling healthy, feeling vibrant, feeling energetic. And we all want that. But you know what? Come to find out, we're living in a world with so many toxins and chemicals and metals and genetically modified foods and things that we do or don't do that could be causing our body a lot of harm, a lot of stress, and could be working against our well-being that we might not even realize. So today I'm really excited to deep dive into this topic with Dr. Peter Kozlowski, who wrote a book that just came out called Unfunc Your Gut, and that's unfunc with a C at the end. And basically what this book covers is how to boost your immune system, heal your gut, and unlock your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. As a functional medicine MD, Dr. Peter Kozlowski uses a broad array of tools to find the source of the body's dysfunction. He trained in clinics with leaders in his field, including Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Deepak Chopra, and Dr. Susan Blum. Currently, he works with his patients online and in person via his Chicago, Illinois, and Bozeman, Montana-based offices. Dr. Kozlowski, so nice to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I'm excited to talk with you.
Awesome. I am very excited because you recently wrote this new book called Unfunc Your Gut, and that's unfunc with a C. And I got a chance to read it, and it is absolutely spectacular. I am blown away by all the information. My mind really was blown. So I bookmarked a bunch of pages to go back and study it again because it's really making me analyze, how I eat. In fact, even just today, after reading your book, I decided that I was going to practice your elimination diet, not completely, but I had this theory that, coffee, I was drinking religiously 2 cups of coffee a day. And, I have dry eye syndrome. And so I look for the things that might exacerbate it. And I thought, you know what? I feel like this coffee thing might not be working well for me. Let me just try to eliminate it and see if I can live without it and see if it will help me at all. I'm sure that's not the way you would prescribe to practice the elimination diet, but nonetheless, it inspired me to at least try that right off the bat while I dive a little bit further into your book. But so tell us a little bit more about functional medicine, because
Sure.
that's your area of expertise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people haven't heard of functional medicine. It is a type of integrative or holistic medicine. There are practitioners within the functional medicine world that are chiropractors, nurses, acupuncturists, nutritionists, health coaches, cardiologists. Me, I'm a family practice doctor by training. So anybody that's in, I guess, the health world can study and get certified in functional medicine. I think a lot of people like to work with me because I do have the medical degree training and have family practice experience. So the best way that I describe it is that as a family practice doctor and through medical school and residency, I was taught to listen to your symptoms and diagnose you and then give you the pill that's going to make you feel better as quickly as possible. And without really thinking about what could be causing these symptoms. And that's what functional medicine is getting to the bottom of what's causing those symptoms. And it is, like you mentioned, the elimination diet. So it is usually from things in our environment, and it's food, gut health, hormone imbalances, toxins like lead and mercury and mold, and mental, emotional, spiritual health. So I, in my book, over and over, try to just keep things simple. I think that one of the biggest things we're dealing with right now is there's just too much information. And through my own a story in my practice with my patients. I've found that the most important out of those 5 areas is mental, emotional, spiritual health. And so that's what I try to teach people in Unfunc Your Gut, is that the diets, the supplements, all of that stuff can be relatively easy if you have your mental, emotional, spiritual health as the focus of your health. And that doesn't mean like we're not having stress, right? We all have stress, and the stress is different for us, and the same stressors could affect us differently. So, and even if now is a low time of stress, there's probably going to be something that happens, right? I mean, that's just life. And so it's the awareness around that is our most important health issue, and to keep that a focus. So in regards to like what you said, where you were like, well, I'm going to try to just cut out coffee. I mean, technically that's not a proper elimination diet, obviously.
I understand.
But if that's where you're at right now, that's totally fine. Right. And if that's what, at this time in your life, that's what you think is the best for you. Absolutely. Like, trying to start an elimination diet today, if you're not ready for it, is going to go horribly. Right. So I really try. I mean, one of the things that I've seen from working with patients over the years, people have a lot of trauma around food, specifically on like going very restrictive diets, right? Yeah. Like they're like, I can never eat this. I can't eat that. And to me, the perfect diet, quote unquote, perfect diet is actually worse for you if you're stressed out about that diet. So I'd rather have people eating processed foods and fast foods if they're like meditating, practicing gratitude, exercising, all these things, if that makes them more relaxed. I mean, obviously that's also not ideal, but I think that, we learn about these diets and you get into the marketing and it's like, oh my God, I got to try this. But if it's not the right time for you, it's not the right time. And so if for now it's coffee, I think that's awesome. I mean, I've done a bunch of elimination diets, and I love coffee. So I currently still do drink coffee. But because I don't react to it, doesn't mean you won't, right?
Right.
That's another huge point of functional medicine, is that it is individualized. The kind of the overlying belief is that we're all different. So it's not just throwing you into a protocol or everybody needs the same dose of this or that. Like, we're all different.
Right.
And that's where just learning about your own body, is crucial.
I love how you take a holistic approach to this: the mental, the spiritual, the physical, and the individualistic approach. It makes so much sense. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about some examples, or an example of a patient that came to you. And I know you treat people both in person and online. So maybe somebody that's come to you with a specific chronic ailment that you were able to help heal or remedy the situation through this approach that you take.
Yeah. So I work with everything from autism and childhood disorders to adults and elderly with dementia.
That's amazing. So autism, it's this. I was blown away by the statistic you mentioned in your book about, yes, maybe you could share a little bit about that with us, and maybe give an example of somebody that you've helped treat who has autism.
Yeah. So, I mean, the rates of autism 30 years ago were like 1 in every like 2,500 people, something like that. Right. Most recently, they were like 1 in 40.
That is so scary. I just got chills. It's really scary. And you know what? It doesn't surprise me, because we're seeing more and more instances in our daily lives. We're encountering people who are on the spectrum to some degree. And it's in my family now too. My brother's son has it, was diagnosed with it at a very, very young age. And it just gets closer and closer to home. Those statistics are scary.
Right.
So you've had patients come to you with autism. Maybe you can explain maybe one of those situations to us.
Sure. Yeah. So that autism, I just want to comment, like, what's the biggest thing that's changed in the 30 years? It's our environment, right? It's the food that we're eating. It's the air that we're breathing.
Yeah.
It's the toxins that we're ingesting. There's not like what's it called? Like, there's not a direct connection study that proves that, but there's a lot of correlation, right? There's this pretty strong correlation with the increase in our environmental toxins and autism or any other kind of chronic
Something's causing it, and we don't know what.
Right.
So,
I mean, if you talk to a regular medical doctor, they're just like, I don't know. I have no clue. It just happens. What I've found is, autism is it's pretty, I would have never dreamed that I could say this, but that's the one condition that our success rate is 100%. And that comes down on a spectrum. I mean, the most amazing stuff I've seen is having kids that never talk, that are talking. They're having like full conversations with their parents.
Wow, that's huge.
Right. And that's kind of the most extreme case, but regardless, like, pretty much anybody that's followed through with what we've recommended, we've seen improvements to some degree. And it is working with a family with autism. It is the same stuff basically that I'm working with as an adult. So we are looking at their food. We are looking at their gut health. We are checking their toxins. So I guess those are the areas that it would be different, is that in adults, like, I'm talking mental, emotional, spiritual health. Obviously with kids that young, they're working, usually families that are with an autistic child are working on that kind of stuff anyway, with all types of therapy. But I would say that those are the three main areas that we look. And I mean, I've seen huge improvements just through elimination diets and identifying what foods kids are sensitive to. And our parents with autistic children are like amazing, because a lot of times autistic kids are really, really particular about like the texture of their food. It's like they have a few things they eat and there's nothing else. So, I mean, it's hard enough to change the diet for an adult, but for a kid that's got, these strong like tastes and textures, but the parents that want to do it, they figure it out. Like they find a way, and it frequently is a struggle in the beginning. And that's something I always try to warn people about when they work with me. I'm like, there's a decent chance that you're going to feel worse before you feel better. And because we are trying to identify and get rid of what's making you sick. Right. We're not giving you a plan right away to make you feel better. It happens over time.
Are there particular foods that you're finding that are continuously aggravating kids or adults, specifically like oils or something like that?
So you mentioned elimination diet at the beginning. So what we're looking for with food is food sensitivities. And I go into depth in the book about what's happened to our food supply, right? And so we've modified our food supply, right? Yep. They hybridized wheat. They've genetically modified soy and corn. Cows stopped eating grass, and now they're eating hay and all these genetically modified substances. The chickens, they get injected with arsenic to kill the parasites and make them produce more meat. So all these foods have been altered, right? Right. And the one thing that and this started about when the rates of autism started increasing. But the one thing they never did when they started changing all these foods, putting all these herbicides, pesticides, glyphosate in our food, they never tested how that would affect human beings, right? And well, we're seeing it now with all this chronic disease, in my opinion. And what we call it the standard American diet, the SAD diet, right?
It is sad. It's very sad.
Full of processed foods, full of added sugars, right? Yeah. And like a simple tip for shopping at the grocery store that I love is shop just the periphery of the grocery store. Stay out of the middle aisles, because the stuff on the outside of the grocery store is fresh. And the stuff in the middle is all in boxes and cans.
So true. But you know what? I do exactly that. It's funny. I was just in the grocery store the other day and I'm like, I'm avoiding literally that entire middle section. That occurred to me.
Yeah,
it's the canned stuff. It's the box stuff. It's the chips. It's the cookies. It's anything that sits in a box. I might pick up a few things from the frozen food section, but even at that, I'm weary and I look to see how fresh the ingredients are, if there's anything processed in it. I have a quick question for you about that when it comes to vegan, this whole vegan craze, which I'm all about it. I think it's fabulous. However, there are still so many bad for you foods that are labeled vegan. Yeah. In particular, I'd love to get your take on the vegan meats. So like the faux chicken nuggets, the faux beef, I can't imagine that's got to be healthy for you.
Yeah. So my best friend from growing up is a raw vegan. So I've had, and he's going on like 5 years now, or maybe even more.
Wow. Kudos to him. I could never do that.
Yeah. Too much. No, sometimes I'll do it with him and I don't last very long.
Yeah.
But no, and this was 5 or 6 years ago. We went to Vegan Fest in downtown Chicago in Grant Park. And I remember walking around there, and the two things that stood out to me the most three. One was that the general appearance of people looked pretty unhealthy, right? There's a lot of like obesity there. And I was just shocked by that. I always assumed naively that like veganism was just about being healthy.
Yeah.
Second thing is that all the food there was like, get a vegan hot dog, a vegan deep dish pizza, vegan chili cheesesteak, vegan double burger with bacon. And I was like,
nothing healthy there.
My friend that's raw vegan, he brought his own watermelon because there was nothing he could eat there.
Wow.
Yeah. Like he was carrying around his own food. So that was an extremely kind of eye-opening event to me. And it made me kind of understand that I think over 90% of vegans do it for ethical reasons.
Right.
And that's something, I mean, I've worked with a lot of vegans over the years. I'm not vegan myself, but most people that do that, it's for the ethical reasons. Because then that way you can still be eating like these, I don't know, all these fake meats and all this stuff. And I mean, we have really no idea what a lot of the, like these foods are made of, like these fake meats, right?
Yeah.
I would prefer you to be eating like grass-fed beef or like free-range chickens, right? I think you're safer because that's something natural, right? That's not something that's like been created in a laboratory.
Right. Yeah.
So just because you're vegan doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy.
Yeah.
There's lots of healthy vegans. My friend John is extremely healthy vegan. So that, I guess, I hope that answers your question. I mean, to me, if you're doing it for ethical reasons, that's something that, I can't argue with. But if you're doing it for health reasons, I do think that there's probably and a lot of this stuff is still too new, right? Like these fake meats and all these fake foods have only been around for a few years. So it's going to take us 30 years probably to really understand what they're causing and what their issues are or not. I mean, we might find out they're totally fine, but I'd be pretty surprised because I mean, it's about as processed as it could be. Absolutely.
Yeah. When I go to get an Impossible Burger, and by the way, I don't tend to eat most meat. I'll eat seafood. So I'm more pescatarian. It's for health reasons more than anything. And my body just responds better when I don't eat the meat. But I know when I go get an Impossible Burger or those fake chicken nuggets, there's this brand called Corn, which has a really good fake chicken nugget. I know it's just as bad as if I went to go eat a real chicken nugget at McDonald's or a real hamburger. There's no difference. It's unhealthy no matter what. So I do it in moderation when I'm being naughty.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's great. Like, that you just the awareness again around that. Like
Awareness. Yeah.
I'm treating myself. Like, just because this box is telling me that it's vegan and organic or whatever marketing they use, doesn't mean it's healthy, right? Like,
yeah. And you know what else? It's interesting. I'm glad you used the word marketing, because we are being marketed to constantly. That is the American diet. What are we seeing on TV?
Right.
Never fruits and vegetables. It's always McDonald's, Fruit Loops, cookies, Pop-Tarts, Starburst. These are the things our kids are growing up with and asking mom and dad for when they go shopping. And then we give it to the kids because we don't want to deny them. But unfortunately, we are now bringing them up with with programming and conditioning to crave these things. And, it kills me that when I see parents who give into their children's distaste for vegetables, and they say, well, okay, my kid just likes chicken nuggets and the cereal and these Pop-Tarts, and that's all they'll eat. So that's all they give them. Our job is to be good, raise our kids with every opportunity possible, help them be as healthy as possible. We are killing our children by training them to eat this way. I mean, we're literally killing them, because if they can't deprogram themselves as an adult to not go for those types of foods and to integrate vegetables into their diets, then it can cause all these other diseases, which you could enlighten us on. But I mean, why would we set our children up for a lifetime of potential diabetes and all these health problems? I don't understand it.
I read this in a book, and I forget the title, but one of the greatest food marketing schemes in history was Lunchables.
Oh God, Lunchables.
And I think they came out when I was a kid, and I don't remember the commercials. You could probably find them on YouTube.
Oh, I remember them.
But they were like not only telling you like how great they were, but they were also being like, you're like a big kid now, like you're making your own lunch, right? So it wasn't just like that this is good food, but it's also like you're an adult, you're a grown up, you're like a big kid, and make your own, lunch. And it's crazy like that the marketing was literally targeting like 5-year-olds like me, like that.
How is
I was a victim to that. And my biggest issue that I talk a lot about in my book is like my trauma from being a first generation American and just wanting to fit in. And the easiest, best way I wanted to fit in was with food. Like I wanted McDonald's, I wanted Pizza Hut, I wanted Lunchables, I wanted mac and cheese because
your parents raised you with the food that your Polish food,
fresh food, vegetables, fermented foods, like, and I'd go to my friends' houses and they'd be eating all this like American food, and I'd be like, this is what we should be eating. And
you wanted to fit in like all kids do.
Right. So it's the marketing of food, and it, unfortunately, I mean, it's the same thing, kind of like the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry are pretty connected, right? And they don't make money by keeping people healthy.
That's right.
Right. They make money by keeping people alive as long as possible, but also sick as long as possible.
So sad. It's so sad. And they make money on treating symptoms, not curing you. That's right.
So if you start someone with Lunchables at the age of 5, you've got a client for life, right? Because they're going to end up with high blood pressure, obesity, probably diabetes. And so you've got business for life.
If we're going to be marketed sugary items and fast food, let's also throw in some PSAs about, eating healthy and exercising and the things that we should be doing.
Right. Yeah, I just think that there's not enough money in those things, and there's too much money in the other things.
That's
so
right. Money.
It's really hard. I mean, I feel like I, from the beginning, have tried to talk to people about just getting themselves healthy, right? Get food sensitivities out, heal your gut, detox. And you won't have to worry about COVID, right?
Right. Exactly. You mentioned in your book, I think, about, what the percentage is of people that actually went to the hospital with these severe symptoms. What was the statistic on that?
I believe it was over 70% were had, maybe it was even over 90%, but just had comorbid conditions, right? And that could be obesity, that could be diabetes, high blood pressure, depression, the comorbid conditions. So basically, pretty much everybody that went to the hospital had one of these conditions, right? And the argument I try to make is that the majority of these conditions are preventable or reversible, right? And if that education, I mean, would have been accompanying all the other stuff, I feel like we'd be in a better spot.
Exactly. If we knew who were the people going in there with these severe symptoms or dying, maybe it would be a wake-up call, but we don't get that information.
Right.
So I'm glad you're shedding a light on that, because it's really important. We have to take an interest in our own well-being and our own health, and not rely on the things that are marketed to us or fed to us. We have to make a conscious effort to give a crap about our bodies and our health and our well-being. And
I've always felt like that was my biggest role as a functional medicine physician, was education, right? And whenever I meet with a new patient, we would spend like an hour and a half together, and the visit was pretty much just all education, right? And sometimes, I mean, there's definitely treatment plans and stuff, but it's not, I can't make people better, but if I can give you the information and allow you to heal, right? To take it into your own hands. And so that's what I put kind of my life's work into my book to give that education, so where people can read a 200-page book and be really informed. I mean, I think that by the end of reading it, that there's just a different understanding of health and what you can do about your own health, and your own health is in your hands. And
absolutely. Yeah.
There's
The book
a lot
was
you can do.
very, very eye-opening, and you put some really amazing information in there that I can't wait to dive even further into. Like I said, I've bookmarked a bunch of pages, and I really want to absorb it, because it's something I want to have as part of my programming. As healthy as I think I am, I do want to take a look and see, like, where am I having symptoms, and how that might be impacted. How might that be impacted by the food I'm eating, or my lifestyle?
And that's just a great point that I want to comment on, is when I do talks and stuff, a question I frequently get is, I'm healthy, why should I see you now? Right. And I'm always like, well, now's the best time to see me. Functional medicine should be preventative medicine. 99% of patients I've worked with are not preventative. We are working with autoimmune disease, chronic disease, anything that's already been going on. And now we're either trying to stop the progression of it or reverse it, right? And then the job is much more difficult. But for someone that feels healthy, doesn't have symptoms yet, there could be an underlying fire brewing, smoking in your body that may not present till next week. It may not present till you're 80 years old, but it's there smoldering and waiting. And that's one of the things we try to identify is triggers, as well as like antecedents, which basically, like, we try to figure out what led you to be susceptible to disease, and then what triggered the disease, right?
So I love that you're mentioning this prevention. This is something I never considered before. So what would that look like? So let's say I come to you, I'm a pretty healthy person, no major issues. How would that look like if I were to see you in that kind of a circumstance?
So I would tell you to look at your diet, right? Which is, I give all that information in my book. So that, I mean, hopefully you've read it already and you've kind of looked at those things. From a preventative medicine standpoint, from a functional medicine standpoint, I think there's two very significant areas that we would do testing. So I do like to run a lot of tests to diagnose these different things. And I would say the two biggest areas would be your gut health and would be toxins. And my book is all about gut health. But if I had to pick one test to run on people as a preventative test, it would be heavy metal testing.
Really?
So, yeah. And
where do heavy metals come from?
So the two most common ones, lead and mercury. Lead is in airplane exhaust, in paint. Pipes were made from lead. It's in our water. It's basically everywhere. Mercury, and I grew up like next to O'Hare, so my lead levels were elevated. I had no idea. The mercury is fish. Dental fillings and vaccines are kind of some of the main sources of mercury. A crazy one that I love to tell people about, and there's two metals called cesium and thallium. They are radioactive compounds that are used in the process of oil fracking and drilling. And they basically like use these compounds to create radioactive water, and that water creates earthquakes and they get oil. Well, that water is left over, and guess who's buying that water? Farms that are going through droughts, right?
Wow.
So if you look at like California, and farms can be called organic and still be buying water from the oil industry.
That is scary.
So the patients that I find with the highest levels of cesium and thallium are the ones that are eating the most fruits and vegetables.
Oh no, don't tell me that, please. Oh no.
Yeah.
I eat a ton of fruits and vegetables. Oh.
At the end of the day, I'd still rather have you doing that than not, right? So it's like, but it's the more you learn about this stuff, the more difficult. I mean, that's where you really have to work on your mental, emotional, spiritual health, because you kind of have to find a way to live in this environment.
Wow. So let's say I came to you because I'm actually very tempted to have a preventative meeting with you.
Yeah.
You would send me to get these tests, and let's say you identified these metals, these toxins in my system. What would you then recommend?
We detox from anywhere from like 6 months to like, some people are on detox protocols for a few years.
And what is a detox? Like, is that not eating fruits and vegetables?
We actually, so with somebody with a significant elevation in lead or mercury, we use what are called chelating medications, which are medicines that pull toxins out of your tissues. So if you've got all this stuff stored, we're giving you a medication to pull it out. So we use chelating agents to basically pull that stuff out. The biggest side effect with those medications is that they don't just pull out the bad stuff. They also pull out some of the good stuff, the nutrients and all of that. So it's a very kind of specific way of doing it, a balance of detoxing, but then also replenishing. So that is, I mean, if you have a significant elevation in heavy metals, that is the best way. That's the only way I think that works, is actual chelation therapy.
So quick question, Dr. Koz. Do you mind if I call you Dr. Koz? No. I think that's your new name. Just kidding. So what would somebody with an elevated level of these metals in their system, what kind of symptoms might they have?
Anything and everything. The systems in your body that are most damaged by toxins are your immune system, your nervous system, and your reproductive system. We can start with reproductive. Low testosterone in men is rampant, right? Men's testosterone is lower and lower, and there's more and more studies about the connection of toxins to that. The women have what's called estrogen dominance, where their estrogen is okay, but their progesterone's too low, and they kind of go through all what are thought of as like the classic PMS symptoms, but really it's a hormonal imbalance, right?
Wow.
So anybody with one of those two issues, I'm going to be testing, right? Immunologic. So the most common thing I work with is autoimmune disease. And so somebody with lupus, somebody with Hashimoto's, then neurologic is MS, autism, things like that. So
and all of those can be triggered by these toxins?
Heavy metals, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't talk about them. Your regular doctor would never talk to you about them. I had a gentleman in his 50s that was on 3 blood pressure medications, and we found very elevated levels of lead and mercury, and he spent a year and a half detoxing, and he's off all his meds now.
And how's he feeling? How's his...
Amazing. I mean, he doesn't have high blood pressure anymore.
So that's awesome. So I wanted to ask you about this antibiotic situation. You talk about that in the book and how it kills our good bacteria. Now, I have to say, I do love my doctor in that she's all about the holistic approach and is always reluctant. If I have something going on, she's always reluctant to prescribe an antibiotic. And she talks about how it kills the good bacteria in your gut. Now, I also saw another doctor for something else completely who was antibiotic happy. He was every little tiny thing. Oh, here's another antibiotic and another one. And it could be like just a month after the previous one he prescribed, and without any regard to gut health.
Right.
And I would just love to get your input on the whole antibiotic situation and what it does to us.
Yeah. So for people that don't know or that haven't read the book yet, or all of us have 3 to 5 pounds of bacteria growing on the inside of our large intestine.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. People are like, what? 3 to 5 pounds? Yeah. It's crazy. These bacteria are relevant. We should not just kill them with antibiotics because they talk to us. They're talking and influencing the different systems in our bodies. So there's studies on weight. They've found specific bacteria that are associated with obesity. There's the bacteria associated with your neurologic system, immune system. So they're talking to us, right? So you need healthy bacteria. When they are unhealthy, they send very negative signals or inflammatory signals to the different parts of your body. We as humans have about 23,000 genes. We have over 22 million bacterial genes in our gut. So
bacterial genes?
Yeah, that's the amount of different bacteria that are growing in us.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's crazy. I have this t-shirt that I wear sometimes that says mostly microbe.
That's awesome.
We're mostly bacteria. But so these bacteria live on the inside of your large intestine in a healthy environment. They eat fiber and sugars. So that's kind of the importance of eating fruits and vegetables, that the bacteria are alive just like us. And if you don't eat, you're going to die eventually. If the bacteria don't eat, they actually die a little bit quicker. So they need to feed every day, basically. I mean, we can make it days without eating, but bacteria can't. So in our standard American diet, we don't feed them, right? And so they die.
Wait, so sugar, let's say it is though high in sugar, that kind of sugar won't feed them?
That kind of sugar feeds the wrong bacteria.
I see.
There's a yeast called Candida that is pretty common that can overgrow your gut. That's what eats sugar. So it's normal for there to be a little bit of Candida in your gut. It's not normal for it to take over. And the best way for it to take over is a bunch of added sugar.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yet another reason why too much sugar is not good for us. I did not know that statistic.
Yeah. So antibiotics, what are they? They are tablets or capsules that were designed to kill bacteria. Where do we put the majority of them?
In our stomach.
In our mouth, right? So you're putting something that kills bacteria into an area that has 5 pounds, should have 5 pounds of bacteria in it. Taking antibiotics just once can wipe out 1/3 to 1/2 of your good bacteria.
Wow, that's scary.
And that's just one time ever. I mean, I think I've only met one person ever. It was like a kid in their 20s who's never taken an antibiotic. But other than that, everybody. I mean, and usually like the older you are, the more you've kind of gone through all the antibiotics.
So how hard is it for that to grow back?
It depends. It depends on your diet, lifestyle. If the analogy that I really like to think about your microbiome, your gut bacteria, your microbiome is like your own garden. And in that analogy, the plants of your garden are probiotics. The fertilizer of your garden is fiber and some sugars. What happens in a garden when you don't take care of it is weeds grow, right? And we're being exposed to weeds all the time in our food, in our air. They're everywhere, right? Bacteria, viruses. Let's say you just took a course of antibiotics and your garden is half wiped out. Well, as all this other stuff is passing through, they're going to look around and be like, we can set up shop here.
Right.
And they start taking over, right? And now you've got all this stuff that's sending inflammatory signals to your body. And in some people that can present as disease within a few months or years. Some people, it could take 30 years. Like it can take a long time in different people. But so that being a gut doctor is where I definitely have a concern about the overuse of antibiotics.
Yeah.
I just want to say I'm not totally against regular medicine. Like if you've got a raging infection and it can't get under control, like you need acute medical care, right? Like if you break a leg and you need surgery to put your bone back in, like you don't want to be coming to me talking about your probiotics.
Right. But you need to be aware of what's happening to your gut.
If you do get on an antibiotic because of your surgery, then you need to spend the next few months restoring your gut.
And so you recommend to do that through probiotics, fermented foods, things like that?
My preference is to do testing because we don't know for sure, right? Just because you had a course of antibiotics or just because your diet sucked, it doesn't mean for sure that your microbiome is going to be imbalanced. So since I have access to testing, I would prefer to test you and be like, let's see what's growing in there, right? Is it imbalanced, right? And one of the things I hope and wish for is that stool analysis is how we do that, but that becomes part of someone's yearly visit, right? So we have a baseline of what your microbiome looks like, idea. Right? Instead of when people come to me, it's like, well, now it's in disease, so we're trying to figure out how to fix it.
So basically, you're saying, don't assume that everything's been killed off and now you need to go into hyperdrive in fertilizing your garden. You're saying it'd probably be a good idea to test it. Now, not everyone can afford to do that. So let's say, what is a good rule of thumb if you've had a course of antibiotics and you want to make sure that you are at least fertilizing your garden? What would you recommend? Yeah,
absolutely. So there's a probiotic called Saccharomyces boulardii. Sac boulardii for short.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Doesn't sound very appetizing either.
It's a capsule, so it's not bad. You don't really taste it. But one of the biggest things that happens, I mentioned that yeast candida that overgrows. That's a big risk after antibiotics. Saccharomyces boulardii prevents that, or it should. So 30 days of that probiotic after starting on the day of your antibiotics or when you finish, 30 days of a Saccharomyces boulardii probiotic is a great idea.
Okay.
In general, just kind of shotgunning probiotics, I'm not a huge fan of because the analogy I like sticking on the garden is like if your garden at home is full of weeds, you don't go to the nursery and buy more plants, right?
Right.
And that's what you're doing when you take a probiotic. You're just trying to plant something in an area that doesn't have room to grow. I would prefer someone to, if they're going to just try to do it on their own, to focus on the foods, pre and probiotic foods.
Okay, and what are those?
Fermented foods. So sauerkraut, fermented vegetables, kimchi, yogurts, the yogurts I'm okay with if you don't have a dairy sensitivity. So that's where you have to do an
Right.
elimination diet. Kefir. So those are some fermented foods. Some of your best prebiotics are things like bananas, garlic, onions, asparagus. A lot of your vegetables are your best prebiotics.
Interesting.
So I think it's much more effective to focus on the foods. Like the Dr. Mercola, a pretty famous physician in my field, he did a study where he just was testing the amount of probiotics that would grow in his own sauerkraut that he was making. And it was like in the trillions compared to like the store brand where it's usually like processed and then they put some bacteria back into it. So you only have a few species in there. So the more you can kind of do on your own.
Or get homemade from a local restaurant or something.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff out there that you can definitely get.
That's a really good point, because I did buy some kimchi from the store the other day, and I love kimchi. And I thought, oh, great, it's really good for me. But just because something says kimchi doesn't mean necessarily that it contains all the things that you're hoping that it would.
Right.
So that's a really good point.
Yeah. And that's just doing the research on what you're buying. A website that I really like is called EWG.org. It's Environmental Working Group. So it's a nonprofit that basically you can type in your favorite makeup, your favorite shampoo, your favorite kimchi, and they have most brands, and they'll give you like a toxicity rating on it.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a great resource.
EWG.org. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
But some of that, like, it's not, this stuff is difficult and it takes time. So you kind of have to just do your best.
And one last thing I wanted to get to with you, doctor, is the SIBO that you talked about. I'd love to have you expand on that a little bit more. What is SIBO? SIBO is spelled SIBO, and it stands for small intestine bacteria overgrowth. And what that means, so the different parts of your gut are your mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. And like I said a little bit ago, the large intestine is where your gut bacteria should live. If you have SIBO, your gut bacteria have moved from your large intestine into your small intestine. So now they're living in this place where they shouldn't. The small intestine is where you should be digesting and absorbing your food. The small intestine should not be lined with bacteria. So just being chronically constipated, having low stomach acid, diabetes, slow transit time, these are all antibiotics. These are all risks for the bacteria to move into your small intestine. And when that's happened, that creates horrible inflammation, because whenever you eat, the bacteria eat. And that can send inflammation to your skin, your joints, your gut, all over. I talk about in my book IBS. In my experience, most people that have been diagnosed with IBS usually have SIBO. A condition like fibromyalgia, which regular medicine will tell you we have no clue. Pretty much everybody I've worked with that had SIBO. So it is an overgrowth of your gut bacteria. And the current gut literature, I think, was lacking in this. And this is what I wanted to teach people in my book is SIBO is a really tough condition, because a lot of the things that you think are healthy, like taking a probiotic, eating more fiber, will actually make SIBO worse. And so someone that starts an elimination diet, if they start feeling worse, that's usually a trigger for me that, oh, this person might have SIBO, because they're eating more vegetables, they're feeding their bacteria more, and they're feeling worse. Yeah.
So what the kind of more extreme diet that we give in my book is the COS plan, which is an elimination diet, but that is also low FODMAP. FODMAP foods are basically like fermentable foods. And so those are the foods that your gut bacteria eat. So by avoiding these foods, you don't feed the gut bacteria and they die, right? So it's a really important thing to understand that's missed just because of like how many people out there think they just have IBS, which regular medicine has no clue. And it's not everybody, but it's usually if somebody with IBS, we're finding one of these gut issues. And so I definitely recommend people to read the chapter on SIBO, and there, I think you'll have a pretty good understanding of it. And also a way to start really treating it.
So are the symptoms of SIBO just like IBS? So you'll know if you're having symptoms?
You don't know. That's another difficult thing with it. I mean, the majority of people do have gut symptoms. So they're going to have abdominal pain, bloating after eating, diarrhea, very often constipation. So any kind of your reflux, so any of kind of your common symptoms can be SIBO. What I've seen over the years is I've had a number of people with unexplained systemic symptoms, rashes, canker sores, joint pain without any gut symptoms at all. And we test them, we find SIBO, we treat it, and those systemic symptoms go away.
So it doesn't have to be a gut symptom.
It doesn't. Majority of people are, but that's what makes it so dangerous is that in a lot of people, they don't know that they're not feeling the gut symptoms, or sometimes people just they've been living with these symptoms for so long, they just think they're normal and they don't even think they're symptoms.
So if someone has acid reflux, for example, that could be
SIBO.
a SIBO.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So how do you test for SIBO?
Breath testing. So your gut bacteria are alive and they ferment like we talked about. So they eat via an anaerobic process. So without oxygen. So when they eat, it creates gas. So what we do is give you a little solution of lactulose, which is a sugar, and then you drink it, and then you blow into a balloon every 20 minutes for 2 hours. Those balloons are measuring for gases. In those first 2 hours, there should be no bacteria present because that sugar is passed from your mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine. There's no bacteria to eat that sugar, so you'll have no gas. If you start blowing out gas, then you probably have SIBO. It's very likely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, doctor, it was so nice to have you on the show today. I think we covered a lot of ground, and I'm definitely going to recommend everybody go check out your book, Unfunc Your Gut. Absolutely incredible. I've really enjoyed reading it. It's been so enlightening. And you might even help save me from some future diseases by implementing some of the things that you recommend in the book. So I really appreciate that you put that out there for us.
Yeah, thank you.
And how can readers find your book online?
So it's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble. It's available, I think, anywhere that you're purchasing books. We have a link on my website, doc-cause.com. So it should be anywhere out there where you purchase books.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show. It was really wonderful to have you.
Yeah, it was great. I feel like we had a good discussion. Thank you.
Dr. Kozlowski, thank you so much again for being here. It was such a pleasure to dive into these topics with you today. Very insightful and enlightening. If you'd like to connect with Dr. Kozlowski yourself, you can check out his website at www.doc-koz.com. That's doc-cause.com. And you can also connect with him on Instagram, which I highly recommend that you do, at doc_cause. That's K-O-Z. And if you liked what you saw today, please don't forget to subscribe. And if we're not connected already on social media, let's connect on Instagram or Facebook. You'll find me at Jenna Banks.0. And you can also subscribe to my newsletter at jenna-banks.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Until next time. And remember, your love is your power.